Did you know that in the 2020 election, corporate spending on political campaigns soared to an eye-popping $14 billion? That's more than the gross domestic product of some small countries. Yet, most voters remain unaware of the extent to which corporate money influences our democracy. In fact, research shows that 90% of Americans believe corporations have too much power in politics, but few understand how deep this influence really goes. Every day, decisions are made that affect your life, everything from healthcare to education. But what most people don't realize is that these decisions are often driven by the interests of powerful corporations rather than the needs of ordinary citizens. The truth is, while we vote for our leaders, corporations are often the ones pulling the strings. In this video, we will pull back the curtain on the hidden world of corporate money in politics. We'll explore shocking strategies like the revolving door, where politicians become lobbyists, and the rise of super PACs that allow unlimited spending. You'll discover how grassroots movements are fighting back against this tide of corporate influence and what you can do to make your voice heard. Get ready to uncover the truth behind the hidden power of corporate money in politics, because this is a story that affects us all. Chapter 1: The Silent Influence, How Corporate Cash Shapes Policy. When we think about how laws get passed, most people imagine politicians debating in Congress, voting on bills based on what's best for their constituents. But there's a hidden layer to this process that often goes unnoticed: the influence of corporate money. In fact, one report by the Center for Responsive Politics found that corporate donors spent over $4 billion on lobbying in 2023 alone. That's not campaign contributions, that's just lobbying. You might wonder, what does all this money actually buy? Well, it's not just access to politicians, it's access to their decisions. Corporations use financial leverage to shape policies that protect their interests, often at the expense of the public. A study by Princeton University revealed that the US government is far more likely to pass policies supported by corporate elites than by everyday voters. Basically, if a corporation wants something, they're far more likely to get it than the average person. Corporations often hire armies of lobbyists to whisper in the ears of politicians. In 2023, there were roughly 12,000 registered lobbyists in Washington, D.C., about 23 lobbyists for every member of Congress. That's not a fair fight. But here's the catch: they don't just ask for favors. They come prepared with data, research, and even pre-written legislation. A report from the Sunlight Foundation found that 75% of legislative proposals introduced in Congress are heavily influenced, if not outright written, by lobbyists. But it's not all about laws being passed. Sometimes, the goal is to stop change. Take environmental regulations, for instance. Oil and gas companies have long used their financial clout to prevent climate policies from gaining traction. According to an Environmental Defense Fund report, these companies spent over $100 million in a single year to lobby against renewable energy laws. It's not just about creating policies that help them, it's about blocking the ones that hurt them. Chapter 2: Dark Money, the shadow players controlling elections. While corporate lobbying is somewhat visible, there's a darker, even murkier layer to this influence: dark money. This is the untraceable corporate money that floods political campaigns, often with the help of shadowy nonprofits. Thanks to loopholes in campaign finance laws, corporations can pour millions into elections without disclosing their identity. One example of this can be seen in the 2020 election. Dark money groups spent over $1 billion, much of it coming from anonymous donors who wanted to remain in the shadows. What's even more shocking? This number is double what was spent in the 2016 election cycle. The rise in dark money isn't just a fluke, it's a strategy. These donors know that by remaining anonymous, they avoid public backlash while still swaying elections. A big part of this strategy involves the use of 501(c)(4) organizations, which are non-profits that are supposed to promote social welfare. But in reality, many of these groups are simply fronts for political spending. They don't have to disclose their donors, so billionaires and corporations can hide behind them while funneling huge sums into campaigns. According to the Center for Public Integrity, nearly half of the total money spent in the 2020 election by outside groups came from these types of organizations. That's a staggering number when you think about it. Half of all political spending in an election was essentially untraceable. One tactic dark money groups use is to launch attack ads against candidates they want to defeat. These ads often appear in the last few weeks before an election, leaving little time for the targeted candidate to respond. Dark money groups know how to time their attacks perfectly to maximize damage, often without anyone ever knowing who funded them. Chapter 3: Lobbying Wars, Corporate Titans versus the People. Corporate lobbying has become a battleground where big money takes on the public's best interests. Corporations spend vast amounts of money to hire the best lobbyists in the game, former politicians, insiders, and legal experts who know the system inside out. They aren't just making suggestions, they're actively crafting the rules of the game. Take the pharmaceutical industry, for example. Drug companies are known for their aggressive lobbying. In 2022, Big Pharma spent over $375 million on lobbying efforts, making it the top spender in DC. The result? Policies that protect high drug prices and limit competition. For instance, efforts to lower the cost of prescription drugs in the US have consistently been blocked, even though 79% of Americans support it, according to a Kaiser Family Foundation poll. These industries don't work alone. They often form coalitions with other corporations or even entire industries to amplify their influence. For example, after the 2008 financial crisis, Wall Street banks lobbied heavily to water down the Dodd-Frank Act, which was designed to prevent another economic meltdown. Through persistent lobbying, they managed to weaken many of the law's key provisions, ensuring that their profits remained intact. It's not just about big-ticket issues, though. Lobbyists also focus on the fine print. They know that the details in legislation can be just as important as the headline. A famous example is the tax code, where lobbyists for multinational corporations fought to include loopholes that allow them to keep profits offshore, avoiding billions in taxes. The Tax Justice Network estimates that US corporations hold $1.6 trillion in profits offshore, money that could have been used for public services like schools and infrastructure. If you're finding this information eye-opening, don't forget to subscribe for more insights on the hidden influences shaping our world. Chapter 4: The Revolving Door. Politicians, CEOs, and the payoff pipeline. When we talk about corporate influence in politics, one strategy stands out: the revolving door. This refers to the movement of people between high-level government positions and private sector jobs, especially in industries they used to regulate. It's a legal but controversial practice that keeps corporate influence deeply entrenched in the political system. A 2020 report from the Project on Government Oversight found that 2/3 of former members of Congress became lobbyists or corporate advisors within 2 years of leaving office. Why? Because they bring something invaluable: insider knowledge and connections. Former politicians know the system inside out, and they know how to get things done. And when they transition to the private sector, companies pay top dollar for their access and influence. This isn't just about cozy relationships. It's about shaping policies and regulations that benefit their new employers. For instance, when ex-politicians take on roles in industries they once oversaw, they're uniquely positioned to push for favorable regulations. A prime example is Robert Rubin, who served as U.S. Treasury Secretary and later took a high-ranking role at Citigroup. He earned over $126 million from the bank while it received government bailouts during the financial crisis. It's a striking example of how the revolving door creates an endless cycle of influence. And it doesn't just work one way. Corporate executives often get appointed to government positions as well. For example, Rex Tillerson, former CEO of ExxonMobil, became Secretary of State under the Trump administration. His ties to oil companies raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest, especially when it came to policies affecting global energy markets. This back and forth between government and business ensures that corporate interests are always represented in the halls of power. Chapter 5: Super PACs, Legal Corruption at its Finest. Super PACs have completely transformed how elections are run in the US. They can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money on political campaigns, thanks to the Citizens United vs. FEC Supreme Court decision in 2010. This ruling gave corporations and wealthy individuals the green light to spend as much as they want on elections, as long as they don't coordinate directly with the candidates. While this may sound like a technicality, it's more than that. Super PACs are the perfect loophole for corporate money to flood the political system legally. In the 2020 election, Super PACs spent a staggering $2.6 billion, according to data from the Federal Election Commission. That's nearly 50 times what was spent before the Citizens United ruling in 2008. The strategy here is simple: corporations and the ultra-wealthy use super PACs to amplify their voices in elections, drowning out the influence of small donors and everyday voters. They can target specific races, fund attack ads, and shape the narrative around key issues, all without any real oversight. Super PACs aren't just helping candidates win elections, they're shaping the political landscape for years to come. One particularly interesting fact is that some super PACs have close ties to the candidates they support, despite the rule about no direct coordination. It's common knowledge in political circles that candidates signal to their super PACs what kind of messaging they need. For instance, a candidate might publicly complain about being attacked on a particular issue, and a super PAC supporting them will flood the airwaves with counter-ads. It's a legal but troubling arrangement. As former President Jimmy Carter once said, unlimited money in politics amounts to legalized bribery. Super PACs ensure that politicians remain heavily indebted to corporate interests, even if they're not coordinating directly with them. If you found this video insightful and want to learn more about how corporate money shapes our world, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your voice matters, and together we can push for change.